So welcome to you, Lord Goldsmith. You're a passionate environmentalist, and you said that your political career has always been a means to an end, and it's really environmentalism that defines you. You have been Minister for the Environment, and now you're an international negotiator on this theme. And I'm delighted to be able to have some time with you just before Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish New Year for the trees. And I'm going to open and close with a personal question. So the opening one is, why do you care so much about the environment, the world we live in this way?
Well, it's such a simple question, but it's also very difficult because I don't know. I don't remember ever not caring passionately. As a little kid, I used to knock on neighbors' doors and see if I could persuade them to give me their pet birds. I couldn't bear the idea of birds in cages. So I built this ramshackle aviary in my. We were very lucky to have a big garden full of a very eccentric assortment of formerly captive birds. At one point, even trying to teach a dove to fly, it lost all its muscles. So you put it on your finger and move it until the muscles rebuild. So I've always cared very much. I actually think all children, I mean, I've never met a child who isn't full of wonder about nature, the natural world generally. I think at some point, life drives that out of us. But I was very lucky. My family, I guess, my uncle, who was a long-term, lifelong environmentalist, I was able to hold on to it and continue, as I'm guessing you have.
Yes, and you remind me of Wordsworth's line, "The child is father of the man," and that's clearly the case in yours. One doesn't lose that.
Yeah.
One's heart still leaps up for a rainbow in the sky.
Exactly. That's wonderful. Yeah.
You've been able to turn that into a significant political career. You're off to South America again. You've had awards from countries in South America, particularly from Colombia. Tell us what you hope to achieve, and you've also told me that there's Indonesia on the horizon as well, with its some major rainforests.
Yeah.
What's the achievable there, and what would be the aims?
Well, the imperative, first of all, is that we stop degrading these gigantic biomes. We know that the Congo, I mean, there's no reliable future for our species if we lose the Amazon, the Congo, the Great Forest of Indonesia. We don't necessarily know exactly why that is, but we know some of it. We know, for example, that most of the rainfall across Africa comes from the Congo. Wipe out the Congo, which we are doing at about 1 million hectares a year. That's going to be a humanitarian a disaster on biblical scales. Likewise, the Amazon, we don't exactly know the role of the Amazon in the world in regulating weather, climate, rainfall, and so on, but we know it has a massive role. And we know that if we cut it, which we are, again, at a very rapid rate, there'll be a huge price to pay. So the imperative is to stop. And instead of destroying, we should begin renewing. And in politics, I had this blessed and incredibly fortunate window of opportunity as a minister with the prime minister at the time, who gave me more or less a blank check to go out and do what I could. And we pulled the world together around some pretty big commitments, which were delivered and made public at COP26. My job now, that I'm not a minister, is to try and help turn those promises into reality. You know, the world is littered with broken political promises. But if we can make real those commitments that we secured in Glasgow, then I think the world will be, at least in terms of our forests and mangroves and wetlands, we will be on a path to recovery. So that is what I'm trying very hard to do in South America. You mentioned Colombia, but also in the Congo Basin, which is more complicated, and Indonesia,
Yeah.
which is less complicated because the government seems really to have almost completely broken the link between agricultural commodities, which is the main cause of deforestation, and deforestation. They don't get credit for it, but they've done enormous good actually in recent years.
Well, all strength to your elbow, all strength to your elbow, and holding the feet to the fire to turn promises into realities and commitments. Thank you. In our pre-conversation, you said you believe we're at a moment of major change and that this is possible. So there's an awful lot about fear in the environmental movement. Tell us about hope, because that's what came across from you.
That is just so important. That question, in my view, is, you know, we know the story. We know anyone whose eyes are open knows how perilous the situation is right now. But I think people can opt for hope, or they can opt for despair. And there is massive room for hope. And one of the things that I've been able to do as a minister and since is actually see examples where communities, even countries, big corporations are getting it right. You know, Gabon, for example, broke the link between logging and deforestation. Logging is a good thing in Gabon for nature, believe it or not. I've walked through forests that have been logged twice. You wouldn't know that anyone had ever stepped foot there. Good for people because there are 10 times more people employed in the sector, and therefore good for the economy. Costa Rica's broken the link between deforestation and all agricultural commodities. Its nature is growing, not shrinking, and people are prospering on the back of that. Colombia, replanting mangroves and coral farming all the way along their coastline as a protection of communities against storms, but also their response to biodiversity collapse globally. There are so many examples. Everything we need to do is already being done somewhere by someone. The problem is that they're all islands of best practice and they're not the default. But if we can get to the point where everyone is doing what we know is possible, we can see with our own eyes what's possible, then we'll be on a path to recovery. So I know it's possible, and that gives me hope. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it is possible.
And here in England, if I can ask, because in your bio it said environmentalism and localism, what can we best do? You're speaking to many Jewish communities, and we relate to Eco Church and Eco Mosque and Eco Sikh as well. What can we do here?
Well, the reality is that a lot of stuff happens at government level, and I'm a passionate localist, but the government sets the rules. That the market does not recognize the value of nature, of systems which we all depend on. The Amazon is still worth more when it's been cut down than left standing. And that is true in the UK, it's true all over the world. So political pressure, I would always say, is the number one thing. We can all be politicians, one way or another. You don't have to stand for election. If a kid does a petition in their school and submits it to their local government, their local MP, that's politics. So I would simply plea for anyone and any who's moved by this issue, which really should be everyone, to flex their own political muscle, to let their politicians know that this matters to them, because so much comes from government making the right decisions as opposed to the wrong decisions. But beyond that, join an environmental group. Do what you can to improve nature in your own backyard. Maybe don't cut those verges. Maybe don't cut all of your lawn. Allow some of it to grow wild. Be part of this very exciting rewilding movement. We can all do that. You don't need 100 acres to do it. You can do it on your windowsill.
Now, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more, both with what the detail and the passion. A last question, seeing this is Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish New Year for trees. Tell us about a favorite tree, a tree you love, and why.
So I have a particular tree, an individual tree, which I adore, which is where I live in the New Forest. I have no, it must be 300-400 years old. It's an oak. It's absolutely staggeringly beautiful. I can't walk past it without stopping and just admiring it, have a real reverence for it. But I have a nerdier selection for you. And it's one that I came across very recently in Colombia when I went for this wonderful award. It's called the Fraile, I'm going to get Fraile Jones, which means the Monk of Jones. And it's this quite ugly plant. It looks a bit like a malformed pine tree, but it grows in the dry hilltops, and it absorbs water from the air and pumps it into the soil. So it actually creates a livable space for all the other plants. Remove that one ugly, unremarkable plant, that tree, and the whole area will die. And I love plants that have that kind of role, absolutely part of the renewal that we need to see around the world. So the Fraile Jones, but I guess in New Zealand, you'd have your equivalent, which is the Manuka, but I'm not going to go down that path. So the Fraile Jones, just because it's so unremarkable to look at, but so dazzling in what it does, and on a personal level, the oak tree that I'm lucky to live near in the New Forest.
Thank you so much, Lord Goldsmith. Thank you very much, and every success in your endeavors and in your work.
And you, thank you so much.